Good night, people. Sorry about good night, people. Sorry about the technical glitch. We should be up and running. So let me know if you are hearing me clear. Let me know if you're hearing me clear. We had to end the last stream and create a new stream. So we hoping all the persons who was on the last screen would show on this one. Um, yeah. So good night to you all. Good night to you all. Yes. Good night to you, Sir Alfred. Um, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're trying to get everything up and running. Everything should be fine now. So just let me know if you can hear me well. We're starting to get a good audience so far. So I am hoping that everything is streaming okay. I'm trying to get this evening's content up and running. So thank you again. Thank you guys again for tuning in every Thursday. Tonight promises to be a very interesting uh, stream. Tonight promises to be a very interesting um, stream. Okay, thank you. Good, good. Yes, everything is well, Sir Alfred. Thank you. Simon Daniel, William Anderson Gittins, Rhonda Paris. Thank you all for tuning in. We are 36 persons so far. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, don't forget to subscribe to Alternate Views. We're discussing the IMF Loans to Barbados, um, asking persons to tune in to the program. We shut down the old stream, so we're on this link. So I'm trying to remove the old one that you all can see exactly um, where we're at this evening. Um, so don't forget to send over the link to your friends, to your family. We all here. So good evening, good evening, good evening to you. Welcome. You know, this evening we'll be discussing the IMF loans. We'll be pulling no punches this evening. Uh, so I'm looking forward to interacting with you, my friends, my family, you alternative viewers. Yes. So again, let us share, let us involve, um, let us involve our family and friends, comrades, colleagues, co-workers, any of the like. Let's have a good discussion this evening. So, as I start this evening, I want to ask you all, how are you guys doing this evening? Alternate Views every Thursday is here to give the information over to the public. That is why we are here. Um, yes, and we want to hear from you. A lot to discuss this evening about the IMF. We have the IDB, we have the World Bank, we have the CDB, and we'll be discussing the loan activity in Barbados. I know many of you may be concerned about the rate of borrowing that Barbados has been doing under this new administration. So we're here to give you some understanding and context as to the list of those loans that we're going to go through. we're going to go through the list step by step, um, so that we don't miss anything, so that you leave with a general understanding of, of where we're at as a country and what we're doing with the loans that we're borrowing, who we are borrowing those loans from, the outstanding amounts on those loans. We learn all of that tonight. We are learning about the differences in the two IMF programs that we've undertaken since 2018. It's very rare for a country the size of Barbados to enter into two IMF programs in such a short space of time. So we're having some discussion there to give you an understanding as to what is happening, what's the common theme, what happened traditionally. We'll be looking at all of those areas tonight. Tonight we expect to have a very long show. Because there's a lot to discuss. You know, last week we had a short week because of technical difficulties, but this week everything was almost perfect up to a minor glitch where we had to change links, but we've done that now and we're up and running and ready to go, and we are set to have a very, very, very keen and interesting discussions. But like I tell you all the time, don't let me talk. I want to hear from you guys, the audience, the viewers. What do you think? What are your thoughts? So I need your feedback in the comments. Um, don't let me get too technical. If you don't understand, slow me down so that I could be able to explain to you guys my interpretation of what we've been going through. So this evening, really and truly, I am here to discuss the list of IMF loans. Um, so that is what I really am going to do. And statements of public debt in Barbados. So I am actually looking for the first slide. Well, I'm actually looking for the first slide. Um, so I can put it up on the screen, and so that you, my viewers, can see exactly where we are at. Yes, so good night to you all. Let me say good night to the persons that I see so far. I see Rhonda, Paris, I see Cecilia Miller, I see Marcia asking the questions earlier. Wendy Ford Griffith, good night to you. Queen McQueenis, good night to you. Good night to Simply Patriot. Hi, good evening to Doria Clark, Zaire Campbell, Beijing Brick, Square 4. Happy to see you. Like we showed up Sir Alfred already. FX Trading BB. Welcome, welcome, welcome to you all. So without delay, really and truly, we're going to jump into the discussion this evening, and I am going to share my screen very early and ask you guys to follow with me, as I am going to put some very serious information on the screen tonight. Right. But before I share my screen, I want to read a quote, as I always do, from Alternate Views, the book. I don't know how many of you know that Kimar Stewart actually is an author of an economics book. It is called Alternate Views, Barbados' Economic Road to Republic. And Alternate Views was released in the year of February 2022, and it gives you an extensive understanding of the Barbados economy, as it provides research and analysis related to the Barbados economy between 2018 to 2021, when we went to a republic. Now, the book sets the scene basically for Barbados' plunge into the arms of the IMF and the different programs that are associated with being in the IMF program, and how they continue to impact on small island developing states, particularly Barbados. So I would have unraveled the different policy options that are available to the government, while still trying to paint the aftermath of coming out of the shackles to the IMF program. Some people say we often criticize no solutions, but I provided extensive solutions in the book. And this book, Alternate Views, Barbados' Economic Road to Republic, is not for just economists, but it's targeted at public servants, chief executive officers, coconut vendors, sanitation workers, anybody. It gives you a very layman explanation as to what is happening in Barbados real time, i.e., the IMF program and the respective measures that the government would have rolled out as we participated. Now, in attempting to go forward, we must go back, not in a reminiscent mood, but just for informational purposes. As you can remember, between the 2008 to 2013 period, Barbados was impacted by the global financial crisis, or what we call the economic recession. Right? And part of the economic recession, you know that all countries buckled really under financial pressure. Barbados was no different. Barbados was severely impacted by the economic crisis, and luckily for us as a country, we had assets that we used to back up or to starve off potential catastrophes. Alternative views could be ordered from Amazon. It is, I think, 20 US dollars, 40 Barbados dollars, plus shipping and handling. If you buy it, if you want a local copy, I think the only location that we have left with physical copies are the University of the West Indies bookshop at the Cave Hill campus. University bookshop, Cave Hill campus. When I get physical copies in hand, I will also announce on the program that we'll be having physical copies for sale again. But as you know, Amazon.com, and it is 40 Barbados dollars from Amazon plus shipping and handling. So as I was saying, the economic recession between 2008 and 2013 uh, brought Barbados some challenges economically, structurally, and Barbados had to embark on some difficult decisions. Um, During that time, we were not in the IMF program. Um, uh, we've had a country who, or at the time, and if you look at the philosophy of the governing administration, I think, who tend to roll out more socialist or keep within a more socialist vein, and being a socialist government, which was led between two prime ministers, which was the former prime minister David Thompson, and then from the former prime minister Frandel Stewart. The practices which was expounded by that administration were more socialist ideals, and socialist meaning that they increase what you call public spending, increase government spending to be able to provide social nets for the population. So those subsidies came at the time in free bus fares to school children. That was a socialist measure. Uh, well, free education at university was a socialist measure, but then that was changed by the same administration. Um, Increases in pay or continued subsidized pay as opposed to retrenchments, right? All of those are socialist types ideals. So what you had at the time was a couple of major institutions in Barbados financially supporting the government, because Barbados was cut off, really and truly. Well, not really cut off, but borrowing became more expensive, and foreign direct investment, most children don't even get it. Well, I try my best to explain, try my best to keep it simple. So just let me know if you're not following. I could slow down and repeat, right? This shows I'm here to give you the information, so that if you can't follow, just slow me down and I will happily explain. Right? But during that period, which is 2008 to 13, Barbados looked to institutions such as the Central Bank of Barbados, such as the National Insurance Scheme, the banking and financial system, which involve the banks, the credit unions, the insurance, and the non-bank financial institutions, which would be like capital finance and globe finance and those type of institutions, right? So the government had to rely on these institutions to be able to support itself because one, the banks were not lending the government past what they call the legal reserve requirement, which says that X amount of dollars are to be stored with the government um, at the central bank, because the central bank is the government's bank. So commercial banks, Republic, First Caribbean, whatever, they keep reserves at the central banks, right? So the banks at the time were keeping the minimum amount required or the legal amount required at the central bank, and they were not lending the government any other thing extra. Right? They were not lending anything extra. So I don't want to go into all of the extra details about that thing particular, but what the government did to the banks now is to say, well, you're not lending me any money, but we're going to increase the legal reserve requirement on the commercial banking system and force the banks at the time to have to borrow more government paper. So banks at the time had way more government paper on their books than they really wanted to have, and it was by force. It was not by choice. So you have the national insurance supporting the government, you had the banks supporting the government, you had the treasury market investors supporting the government, and we had very little foreign direct investment going in Barbados. Right? We had very little foreign direct investment going. In fact, Barbados came under severe pressure internationally as the agreement that we signed with Canada, which is called the Exempt Surplus Agreement, which allowed Canadian companies like Gildan and some of the others, saying First Caribbean and all of those large Canadian conglomerates which came to Barbados during the 1990s period and the early 2000s, these businesses were allowed to repatriate their dividends into Canada tax-free. Right? Tax-free. I said it again, tax-free. So therefore, Barbados enjoyed a strategic advantage as it relates to Canadian business. So what the Canadian Parliament did, right? What the Canadian Parliament did was to force Canadian businesses to expand that same agreement that Barbados had to all other countries. So therefore, Barbados no longer had a strategic advantage because the other countries that were included in the loop had much lower tax rates, like 0 tax rates, 1% tax rates, 2% tax rates, 5% tax rates. So Barbados was struggling to compete with other international business jurisdictions, which caused Barbados to lose $250, $300 million a year over a period of time. Like every year, Barbados was losing $300 million in revenues. So our budget was shrinking because of that, right? It was shrinking because of that. We were not raising the revenues that we wanted locally from taxation, and the population was already basically tax fatigue during the time, and painful measures were implemented. And painful measures were implemented at the time, which caused some serious kickback in society, right? I want to quote the former Prime Minister of Barbados, and remember, I'm quoting him not from a political sense, but the fact that politicians are indeed policymakers. You have to quote because remember, this is an economics program and not a politics program. But to quote the former Prime Minister from the shore, he said, and I'm going to paraphrase him, no, these are not his exact words, but both he and the last Minister of Finance, Mr. Sinclair, had indicated that Barbados was not interested in pursuing the IMF program. Let me say, Barbados was not interested in pursuing an IMF program. They were more interested in a local, homegrown program, right? A homegrown program. So you had, I think it was about 7 or 8 attempts at an economic program. It was called the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Program. They was given some names and they tried some things locally. And that is where we saw the NSR budget. That is where we saw the reduction in fees at the University of the West Indies, because what government would call as the deficit was becoming unsustainable. Right? We were constantly being downgraded at the time, and around December 2013, around 3,000 workers were laid off from government. We also had the fact that the trade unions were working against the government at the time. So you had the merger of the business class, the trade union class, the working class. You had we call marriages of convenience, which then allowed the government to be on its back foot really and truly, along with the external pressure to join an IMF program. When the government changed, it was announced by the new prime minister that Barbados was set to default on its debts and enter into an IMF program. Right? And bear in mind, I started back from 2013 to show you that between that period we were not in an IMF program. We came into the IMF program, which was called the Resilience and Sustain, the not the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. That's the second one. Sorry, the Extended Fund Facility. Sorry, we signed an IMF Extended Fund Facility in 2018. Right. This was called the BERT Plan, or the Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Plan. But Marcia, I want to backtrack a little bit later on the measures that the banks take. Please give me a reminder. I will explain it. But I just want to get through some of the introductory stuff. Okay, so they signed the BERT Plan, the Barbados Economic and Recovery and Transformation Plan, funded by the IMF, which they said were to undertake structural adjustment. Now, fancy words, but structural adjustment simply means that the government was rearranging the way how the money flows. And as Joshua is saying here, follow the money trail. Right? So the government was basically thinking. So one of the first thing we did was to start printing money. We were printing money. We were printing large sums of money. And it put some pressure on the foreign reserves. And the foreign reserves at the time were very low. So you remember the last political figures campaigning, and they were keep harping about the foreign reserves, the foreign reserves, the foreign reserves, and the foreign reserves being low. So around 2018, the foreign reserves were around 220 million, which is basically a very slim window. I think that was about 4 to 6 weeks cover. Right? That was not the world benchmark for foreign reserves. So there were some alarms raised about the fact that our reserves were low. There were some alarms raised about the fact that we were constantly being downgraded. But let me say, we were being downgraded, but we were not borrowing multilateral debt from the IMF and the CDB, and well, we were borrowing from the ADB, but we were not indebted to these institutions. We were downgraded on the fact that Barbados we were downgraded about the fact that our revenue earning potential was constantly being eroded. Okay, so if you can't earn the money, you get downgraded. If we run economic analysis and stress tests on the economies, and we find that your potential to earn revenue is becoming slimmer and slimmer. You become downgraded. If we recognize that your expenses are going to balloon out of control, then you get downgraded. So Barbados was being downgraded on that basis and not on the basis of borrowing. Right? Yes, we borrowed some loans. We borrowed a loan from the Credit Suisse Bank, um, which again I think was not a very properly structured loan, because there was a clause in that Credit Suisse loan which says that every time the country becomes downgraded, that there was an increasing interest. So you had a loan which jumped massively in interest costs because the government was being downgraded. So we had to pay large sums of money, millions, because of the credit downgrades. So you see, credit downgrades benefited. I think it was Citibank, a loan that we had, Credit Suisse, sorry, the loan that we have with Credit Suisse, which is an international bank, right? They benefited significantly from the country being downgraded. So every downgrade Barbados had, Credit Suisse was making millions on top of every downgrade. So you see the connection between the credit rating system and the international banking system, and how the policies of the credit rating system, if they keep downgrading the country, well, these countries have clauses in their finances which says that every time the country is downgraded, you got to pay increased interest costs. You see clearly where Barbados was squeezed on loans like that. Yes. So in moving on, Barbados signed on to the IMF program to tackle what the experts would call some structural problems that we had. And those structural problems are: one, high public debt to GDP, right? So basically the debt was high, right? We were paying 156% of GDP, debt to GDP. That is basically saying, all right, how this GDP thing is explained is that out of uh, a dollar, we said $100, um, if debt to GDP was 90% of your earnings go back towards debt. Right? So Barbados is at 175%. So we were not making any revenues because most of the revenues that we had was going back to paying debts. Right? So we had a problem where our debt payments were becoming so out of control that we chose to enter into the IMF program. And the IMF program, which the IMF said is not really theirs, but the Barbados government brought the birth plan to them, and they just signed off on the birth plan. Remember, the IMF is saying that the birth plan is a homegrown plan, and this homegrown plan was brought to them by the government. Right? I want to read a letter that was written to IMF Director Christine Lagarde, and to read some comments from Ms. Lagarde, who was the former IMF Director at the time Barbados signed on in 2018. And it says here, as announced by Prime Minister Motley earlier today, the Barbados economy has been going through significant challenges for some years. The authorities are developing an economic reform program designed to address these challenges, and they have asked the international community and the International Monetary Fund to assist them in putting the economy back on a path to recovery. An IMF team led by Bert Van Selm will be visiting Bridgetown to start discussions on how the fund can support the authorities' economic plan. Our ultimate goal is to help Barbados achieve higher standards and more inclusive growth for the years ahead. And in a statement at the conclusion of the IMF staff visit to Barbados, the fund made the following comments. This is the IMF speaking now. It says, Barbados is in a precarious economic situation. International reserves have dwindled to US 220 million, while central government debt is unsustainable. The fiscal deficit, you guys know what a deficit is, but has decreased over the last years, but remains large. Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Barbados is reporting a contraction or decrease in economic output of 0.7% in the first quarter. And the Barbadian authorities, in close consultation with their social partners, are rapidly developing a plan to address economic vulnerabilities. Hi, Tyrone. Good evening. So as we were saying here, we are rapidly developing a plan to address economic vulnerabilities, and we welcome the government's plan to urgently address infrastructure problems. And it is a goal of seeking to support the most vulnerable during the economic adjustment process. At this juncture, the IMF's recommendations contained in the 2017 Article 4 consultation report remain highly relevant to rebuilding confidence and address Barbados' current challenges. Substantial fiscal consolidation, basically that is the reduction in the size of the government, privatization of SOEs, etc. And the fiscal consolidation is needed to place debt on a downward trajectory in conjunction with the proposed debt restructuring. And to address the balance of payments, which is the area with the reserves, remember me speaking about the reserves, the 220 million. So to address that reserve problem, they will roll out a plan that they could help to address that vulnerability and basically reduce the risk that the country would default further on any debts. So it says here that since tax and revenues are relatively high, this was before anything happened. This is the early stages of the MF program. It says here, since tax and revenues are relatively high, the adjustment effort should focus on the expenditure side, which is government spending and cutting it, including by improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of public services, containing wages, cutting the wage bill, and reforming government pensions, like reforms to the national insurance. Government transfers to state-owned enterprises need to be reduced, hear that, by reviewing user fees. You heard me speaking about user fees before. Exploring options for mergers and privatizations, and by providing much stronger oversight. Tax policy should be reviewed with a view of broadening the tax base and improving its progressivity, while efforts to strengthen tax administration should continue. Structural reforms are critical to improve the business climate in Barbados to attract investment and to develop the private sector. That was the IMF director, Ms. Lagarde to Barbados. Now, when we embarked on this program, and I gave you the 4 principles of it, you would hear the governor of the central bank, Dr. Kevin Greenwich, constantly referring to the 4 apocalyptic horsemen. Right? He calls it the 4 apocalyptic horsemen, which was high debt, large deficits, basically operating in the red, high transfers to SOEs, i.e., printing the money to be able to give to state-owned enterprises like Water Authority and Transport Board, all of the increased funding from central government going to that was supposed to be cut, and low foreign reserves. So those 4 apocalyptic horsemen were the basis of Barbados entering into the IMF program, right? And it says here, through the combination of the restructuring and the consolidatory process, government will try to possibly increase revenue by increased taxation and cuts in government expenditure, and that is exactly basically what they did. Now, I'm going to pull up now what you really all come to hear, which is the loan portfolio, to show you that it's a very interesting sight to see what is happening. Good night to you, Gail Biz. Tyrone is saying, coming to your comment now. Kimar, you have a guest this evening. It shows me to see how you can explain the economics. Hi. Hi, Pamela, Mervyn, Marius. Good evening to you all. Freedom for Democracy and Integrity. Gail Biz. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to you all. I hope I'm keeping you. I am about to show you my screen now, so I want you to pay keen attention to, because I'm going to bring up the list now that you can see. Hmm. Um, can you see my cursor? Let's let me know if you can see my cursor. Um, if you can see my screen. Whoa. I'm hoping you can see my screen. Look at where my cursor is pointing. Right here on International Monetary Fund. Doesn't show how I want it to show. It's not showing how I want it to show, but at least you can see where it says here International Monetary Fund, and then it goes on to basically give the dollar amounts as to what we are going to discuss this evening. Right. So it says here International Monetary Fund. Now, before I get into this, let me just break down briefly Barbados. Barbados' IMF funding. What funding arrangements we went into. Barbados entered in 2018 an extended fund facility with the IMF. An extended fund facility with the IMF. And to date, the government of Barbados, not what I'm saying, the government of Barbados is reporting that they owe the IMF's extended fund facility $606 million. Hey, 600, look, it's right here, $606 million. That is what the government is reporting about what they owe to one of the IMF's funds. $606 million they owe on the first birth plan. Right? Remember, we signed two IMF programs, one in December 2022 and one in 2018. So where you can see my cursor here, which says EFF, right? It says that the government owes the IMF $606 million. This extended fund facility breaks in two. When I say two, I simply mean that we signed one extended fund facility with the IMF for 2018, and in 2022, we signed two IMF programs, which is one extended fund facility, and then we signed a resilience and sustainability trust. And Barbados was actually one of the first countries in the world to sign on to that type of IMF program, which is called a resilience and sustainability trust. And look, it is right here where my cursor is at. I mean, okay. Whoa. Right. Okay, it's right here where my cursor is at. Budget support extended fund facility. And then budget support Barbados economic and resilience and sustainability trust. Right. So you see the difference. I just wanted to show you the names. Right. So on the resilience and sustainability trust, no, the government actually owes the government no on that IMF program. Trying to come around here. Right. I zoomed it all the way in. Look right here is where I am speaking to you. Look at the two facilities. I just highlighted it that you can see. So you can see clearly what the IMF owes or what we owe to both IMF programs. Right, sorry, let me get. Right. So I got it right onto the screen that you can see the amount. I tried to close the panel, but I can't get it shut as you guys will wish, because this is the. Oh, right. So, guys, this is the best that I can get right here. So I hope you see where my cursor is at. Right here. IMF Extended Fund Facility, IMF Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Wow, it's too small. But my bad. But I'm gonna try to get the font a little smaller so you can see. Just give me 1 second. Let me try to rectify that. But in the meantime, I am going to give you these amounts as to what we owe are owing to the fund as reported by the government of Barbados. Right. So 606 million under the extended fund facility or the EFF, and then we owe 153 million to the new RST, or what you call the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. No, we don't want to be caught up. So we're going to use some basic calculations here. Since you guys are the math wizards, if you add 606 million plus 153 million, you would get $759 million in total that the government of Barbados right, that the government of Barbados, like $759 million that the government borrowed from the IMF at the end of December 2023. Right? You hear what I just said? By the end of December. So I did not account for January, February, nor March. So whatever loans that have been borrowed from the IMF between January and March, I don't account for those. I'm accounting as far as the December 2023. The government of Barbados is reporting through two facilities. So don't when you see every couple of months you see new IMF loan, new. They're not really new per se. They are broken down in pieces. So you got 80 million here, you got 90 million there, you got 200 million here, right? So they've been broken down in pieces and stretched through the year. So all of the loans that you see through the IMF program from 2018 until now, It equates to $759 million that we owe to the IMF. Right? That's just the IMF, not speaking about the other institutions, right? Not speaking to the other institutions, and those other institutions, i.e., right? So for those persons who need to see it once more, those persons who need to see it once more, just give me a heads up. Do you want to see the actual dollar figures once again to the amount of money that we owe to the IMF? 759 million. So I gave you the explanation. I broke it down quite simple, and I'll go through it once more. I'm going to go through it once more. We borrowed from the IMF under two facilities, right? Two facilities. The Extended Fund Facility and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust Fund. In 2018, we borrowed from the Extended Fund Facility only, right? We borrowed from the Extended Fund Facility only. And then in 2022, right? In 2022, we borrowed from both the Extended Fund Facility and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, right? So those are the two facilities, and in total, both facilities have lent us $759 million in total that we owe the International Monetary Fund. Right? That is Barbados dollars. That is not US currency. It is not US currency. That is Barbados dollars. Right? So you're saying that the amount that is owed to the IMF is not substantial, right? But it is substantial, I should say, right? But it is not a worry as you thought, because the real trouble is not IMF borrowing, and I'm going to prove that to you in my next slide, right? So I just showed you essentially, right? I just showed you essentially how much money the government owes the IMF, but that doesn't make sense compared to what you see happening. The government borrowing billions and billions and billions. It doesn't make sense, right? But I'm going to help you to make sense of why that is so, and why it seems strange, that I thought the government owed the IMF more money. Well, let me show you exactly who the government owes and has a very large debt profile too. Have it here, trying to pull it up for you. Yeah. Remember, the basis for entering an IMF program, and if you listen to Ryan Strong and Marshall Caddo, they will tell you that the IMF program unlocked critical financing for them. It unlocked critical financing for them. So the IMF program unlocked financing from the IDB. It unlocked financing from the Caribbean Development Bank. It unlocked financing from the European Investment Bank. And it unlocked financing from some other multilateral institutions. So I want to show you guys right here real quick what I am talking about. 25. Whoa. So I have it right here. I'm bringing it up for you. I have it right here in front of me. It is not Barbados dollars, so you don't have to you don't have to be scared about it. There it is. So I told you guys about the IMF, right? So we started right here at the IMF. So as you can see from the bottom of the page, Barbados is $14.4 billion in 14.7 billion in public debt altogether. Right? $14.7 billion in public debt altogether. Right? Hoping you guys can see this one well. I'm gonna try to zoom it in once more. Right. Right. So $14.7 billion in debt. Central government, if you look here, bring the cursor here that you can see. Right. I gave you that figure just now as to how much the government owes the IMF, 759 million. When you come right here, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Remember when Barbados entered into the IMF program, the IMF has supporting institutions that lends your government money. So the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development lent Barbados $441 million, right? And you can look at what the loans they borrowed, $100 million for COVID-19 response, green and resilient recovery. Right? Look at this right here, $200 million a piece. So that is $400 million plus $41 million that was given for HIV project, right? That the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, we are indebted to them $441 million. Two big loans which occurred between 2018 and 2022 between two IMF programs, because one is for COVID-19 response and then one is for a green and resilient and recovery program. So that is $400 million a piece plus $41 million for an HIV project, right? So because we borrowed from the IMF, that then unlocked additional financing at the International Bank for Reconstruction, $400 million worth, right? So hoping you guys following me there. When they come up again, the Latin American Development Bank, right? Look at this right here, the Latin American Development Bank. Right here where the cursor is at, gonna highlight it that you can see, right? We know all the Latin American Development Bank, we borrowed, 520 million altogether, right? We borrowed $520 million from the Latin American Development Bank, right? Let me just read what these loans are for. Whoa. Okay. Right. The government actually raised $100 million from a CAF policy-based loan, $70 million from a CAF sector-wide approach program, another $30 million for a tax administration program, $20 million for a water rehabilitation project, which is strange, but yeah, $20 million. Then we have $200 million in another COVID-19 program, right? So that is $400 million in COVID loans already, you know, based off what we quoted. Right? 200 here and 200 more million in the last from the European Reconstruction Bank. Right? And then we have another $100 million loan which says land transport sector in Barbados. So we borrowed $100 million to fix land transportation in Barbados. Right? So it accounted to approximately $520 million from the Latin American Development Bank. And we've paid back some sums already. So out of the 520 million, we've paid, we still owe 350. So that equates to us about, we paid $170 million back to the Latin American Development Bank so far. But we still owe them approximately $350 million more. Right? When we go up once more, hoping you guys are sticking in. Right? When we come up once more, we now have the IADB. Right? We have the IADB. We are approximately we borrowed approximately $1.7 billion from the IADB. Let me repeat that for you. We borrowed $1.7 billion from the IADB. Right? Put it in the chat. 1.7 billion we borrowed from the IADB. Right? Right? We borrowed 1.7 billion from the IADB. So let me issue a disclaimer. Some of these loans were borrowed under the last administration. Some of these loans were borrowed under the last administration. So we had a debt portfolio with IDB before. Let me also say that debt to multilateral institutions was only approximately $1.6 billion. Debt to multilateral institutions in Barbados in 2018 was approximately $1.6 billion because the government paid what it owes. 54 million Barbados dollars to restructure $963 million worth of foreign debts. Right? The Chinese debt was not restructured. I think one or two other loans were not restructured. Right? So the IDB, as we can see here, all of these are loans, people, by the way. Right? All of these are loans that we are seeing right here on the screen from top to bottom. Top to bottom. I know it looks unbelievable, but it is real. This is the amount of debt that Barbados has borrowed from these people internationally. Right? So let me read some of them for you. I'm going to read the bigger ones. Starting from the bottom first, you had a program to strengthen social services in Barbados. We borrowed $200 million on that one, right? We borrowed $40 million for digital infrastructure, digital transformation for inclusive and quality education. We borrowed $200 million, again, a program to strengthen public policy and fiscal management in response to the health and economic crisis caused by COVID-19. So that is $600 million in COVID loans between the three institutions, the IMF, the International Bank for Reconstruction, the Latin American Bank, and now the IDB. Three separate $200 loans. Right? So that is $600 million in COVID loans already. That is just what we see here. So you have $200 million from this COVID to protect and response to health and economic crisis caused by COVID in Barbados. Part 2. Right? Then have a COVID-19 program, a BA COVID-19 program, which is another $240 million. So that is $840 million in loans. I'm going to highlight it right here that you can see where my cursor is at. right? Look where I've just highlighted, right? So we count here. I hope you're following me, right? I hope you're following me. I hope you don't get lost here. $240 million here, BA COVID-19 program. I have it highlighted here that you can see. Another $200 million, which is program to strengthen public policy and fiscal management in response to health and economics. That is another 200. Then you had another 200 from the Latin American Development Bank. And then you had another 200 from the Bank for Investments and Reconstruction. So that is $840 million in COVID loans alone from 3 different institutions. Hope you're following what I'm saying here, people. Okay. We then have another program, which is a Sustainable Development Policy Program, $160 million. Right? $160 million that we owe for that particular program. Right? We have a loan here. I'm trying to look for the bigger ones. It says here a loan, a $200 million loan, which was a macroeconomic emergency program to protect economic and social progress. We borrowed $200 million. We paid back some, so we only owe $88 million there. But I'm hoping that you guys are seeing factually, right? Factually. I'm hoping that you're seeing factually on the screen how much loans we owe internationally. So I hope you're writing these figures down so that you get an understanding of what is happening in Barbados. Right? That is not all. Let us come higher. Okay. Can I talk? Right. It says here the Caribbean Development Bank, the CDB, right? The CDB. The biggest loan, or the biggest loans, sorry, that we borrowed from the CDB is a first programmatic fiscal sustainability growth and social protection policy-based loan at $150 million. And then we have a social program, a second, programmatic fiscal sustainability growth and social protection policy-based loan for the CDB. Both are at 100. So that is $300 million. $300 million in terms of the largest loans, right, are from the CDB. Then you still have some loans in here for enhancement of immigration, water. This can't be right. A water supply network. We borrowed money from the CDB to fix our water supply network. We borrowed approximately $71 million there. We then borrowed $66 million to modernize the fleet of LIAT. $66 million to modernize the fleet, the LIAT airplanes. And then we have another $67 million that was borrowed in support for LIAT. Right? Now, as I said, some of these loans were borrowed from the last administration, so it is not to single out the government and say what the government borrowed. But Barbados as a country owes this money. Right? Barbados as a country owes this money. And they specifically focus on the multilateral institutions, the IMF, the IDB, the CDB, because this is where we've been borrowing majority of the funds that we've borrowed so far. Right? Somebody asked me, Yeah, somebody asked me to calculate a total. So let us do some calculations. CDB, you have $450 million, right? All right. So let's come down. When we look at the IDB, that is 1.6 billion. When we come down to the Latin American bank, we have another 350 million. When we come down to the Investment Bank for Reconstruction and Development, we have another 441 million. And then from the IMF, we have another 759 million. So that is 3.6 billion approximately in debt owed to multilateral system in Barbados. Debt owed to the multilateral system in Barbados. And that is out of 14.7 billion, right? That is out of 14.7 billion in total central government debt. Right? 3.6 billion owed to the multilateral institutions. Right? Remember, we just add them all. The IMF, the IDB, the IADB, the Investment Bank for Reconstruction, the CDB. So in total, we owe the multilateral system $3.6 billion. And at least 840 million out of that was just COVID loans. Right? We did all the calculations. We showed you the facts. All of the files are here on the screen for you to see. Right? So as you can see clearly, 14.7 billion. Remember, I told you guys that debt to the multilateral system was only 1.6 billion. This is out of the total foreign debt profile Barbados had during that time. So you move from 1.6 billion, right? You move from 1.6 billion to 3.6 billion. So let us work that out. Right? So they have gone past comfortably. They have gone past, they are about 2.1 billion. Right? When you take away the debt, the complete debt, the figures that we just added to the debt that's owed to the multilateral system alone, right? When you take out that debt to the multilateral system alone, what is that now? And you compare it to what it was at in 2018, you're up at 2.1, you put up at $2.1 billion in a massive increase in debt owed to the multilateral system. And $840 million alone are in COVID loans. The information is right here on the screen. Right? The information is right there on the screen, people. So I hope that you're enjoying this discussion this evening. I'm happy to be sharing this afternoon because this is vital. So I want some feedback from you because we're going to keep going. Huh? I just gave you what we owe to the multilateral system, but I haven't touched on what we owe to the Chinese. Right? I haven't touched on what we owe to the Chinese. Right? So we're going to get there. But let me pause for a moment because I know I gave you a lot. I know I gave you a lot. So I want to garner your feedback so far? What are your thoughts? Right? Do you want to see my screen once more to see these figures? Right? Do you want to see my screen some more to let these figures soak in? Right? Because these are some massive numbers that we've been borrowing to the multilateral system. Right? So I want you guys, I want some feedback. So let me just say good evening to some persons we're seeing here. Sean Cole, thank you. Sandra Brewster, welcome to Alternate Views. Jefferson Ward, thank you for tuning on. Zaire Campbell, Hurricane Writer, thank you for tuning on this evening. Black Man from the Islands, thank you very much. Very happy to see you. Richard Mears is saying, Kimara, that money going have not seen any improvement in Barbados. Somebody have deep pockets. Well, you, the people, have to say to me if you see development which correlates to the level of loans that we have. If you see development, which can say, well, we borrow the money, at least I can see where the money is going. If you can see where the money is going, well, that is great. I'm not here tonight necessarily to determine if you're saying money's worth. My goal here is to give you the information. Now, this is where I have a challenge, right? And this comment here by 1776 Freedom. It says here the COVID loans will be discharged eventually because COVID is one big fraud. Now, let me say this to you guys. During COVID, the government of Barbados agreed with the IMF that all COVID monies are intended to be transparent. Accountability, transparency. Accountability, transparency. Right? And I've had instances where I had to challenge the Minister of Finance, and I can call his name. I've had to openly challenge Mr. Ryan Strong, who's the minister in the Ministry of Finance. Right? And I've had to say to Mr. Ryan Strong that the government's handling of these monies has not been above board, has not been transparent, because on one of these $200 million loans from the IDB, I wrote a letter to the Nation newspaper, and it says this: Dear Mr. Ryan Strong, and I should really put this letter up on the screen that you guys can see it. It says, Dear Mr. Ryan Strong, this is in response to the $200 million loan that was borrowed for COVID from the IDB. I wrote this to the Nation newspaper, and the Nation newspaper carried it. And it said, Dear Mr. Ryan Strong, this letter is an issuance of grave concern with the government of Barbados and the IDB loan seeking to borrow $200 million and the heightened perception of corruption and unethical practices within government. Yes, I want to put it up on the screen so that you guys can see. It was featured on Barbados on the Ground, so I'm going to put Barbados on the Ground's article on the screen because it carried the same article that was in the Nation newspaper. So you guys can follow exactly where I went with this. And so just give me one moment. Let me put that article up for you that you guys can see. Got him. Yes. There we have him, Mr. Ryan Strong. So it says here, open letter to the minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ryan Strong. And I went on to say here, this letter is of grave concern with the government of Barbados and the IDB seeking to borrow $200 million and the heightened perception of corruption and unethical practices within the government. Taken from the executive summary of Transparency International, this year's corruption perception index paints a grim picture of. It says here, it paints a grim picture of the state of corruption worldwide. The pandemic is not just a health crisis or economic crisis, but a corruption crisis. A corruption crisis. With countless lives lost due to government corruption, government corruption, undermining a fair and equitable response to issues of the day. A letter issued a letter issued to the Nation newspaper featured on December 7th, 2022, which is my birthday, by the way. That was the same day that the IMF program was signed, December 7th, 2022. The letter that I submitted to the Nation newspaper, which was featured on December 7th, 2022, raised some concern about sections of the letter to the acting IDB president, signed by yourself, Ryan Strong, Minister in the Ministry of Finance. Component 4 of the letter to the IDB president said that the loan is for economic and fiscal strengthening for post-pandemic. Right? So another COVID loan that was for after the pandemic. The blatant red flag in component 4 of your letter, Mr. Strong, is the use for the reason of borrowing this $200 million loan and the recommendation from a progress report of the measures prioritized by the Jobs and Investment Council. If you guys remember, the Jobs and Investment Council was set up by the Prime Minister, who's the Minister of Finance, and the Jobs and Investment Council had on Ornafa, who was the former Prime Minister of Barbados. It had on former Finance Minister Christopher Sinclair, and it was intended that the former Minister of Finance and Prime Minister Sir Lloyd Sandiford, it was intended for him to be on the committee, but it did not work that way. Okay? So y'all remember the committee. So the letter is saying that this Jobs and Investment Committee recommended that the government of Barbados borrow $200 million. So I said that investigations into the missing report revealed that at no point in time did the Jobs and Investment Committee meet to be able to recommend the government to borrow $200 million. I'm going to say that again. Investigations into this missing progress report revealed that at no point in time did the Jobs and Investment Committee meet and report, neither did they publish the findings or the recommendations to the public, town hall, written media. Nothing, nowhere. Right? Which says that the Jobs and Investment Council really indeed recommend for the government to borrow this $200 million. It was found nowhere. Right? I went on to say next in the letter that the Jobs and Investment Council met in April of 2020, and according to the Prime Minister, Mia Motley, the members were expected to report back to the government of Barbados within 2 to 4 weeks. The committee never reported, as some interesting developments occurred. Ornafa died, and then Chris Sinclair went over to Washington. So the committee could not have been meeting with the persons that they suggested were on it, right? So Ornafa died, Minister Sinclair, he's off to Washington. But still, this committee that the minister ran strong is saying that this committee where Onafo died and Chris Sinclair is gone that never met, this committee recommended him to borrow in the name of the Ministry of Finance and the people of Barbados. This committee recommended him to borrow $200 million. So there was a raising a red flag. And to distract the people of Barbados, right? And to distract the people of Barbados, that is when the government announced a VAT-free day. If you all can remember, during that time, the government announced a VAT-free day to hide the fact that they were attempting to borrow $200 million in COVID loans on recommendations from a committee that was not meeting, which is the Jobs and Investment Committee. Right? So they gave us VAT-free day to distract us at the time. And I said, therefore, allegations of unethical practices and heightened perceptions of corruption in government, herein that the minister, the Ministry of Finance, may have falsified, i.e., he told lies, falsified, it was not the correct information, a letter to the IDB in claiming that the use of recommendations from the Jobs and Investment Committee was the reason for borrowing this loan, and the non-functionality of the committee is hereby in question and raises a challenge with the queries on if the committee did in fact make the recommendations to borrow the $200 million from the IDB as was contained in the letter. I went on to say that in a bid for transparency, Minister Strong, you were asked to publish the progress report. Right? You were asked to publish the progress report, which you mentioned in your letter, which was included in the Nation newspaper as the reason for borrowing the additional $200 million. So if we could have seen the progress report, which the minister in the Ministry of Finance claimed was the basis that the Jobs and Investment Committee made the recommendation to borrow the $200 million, on the basis of transparency and accountability, we should have seen the recommendations from the Jobs and Investment Committee. But Onafo is dead, and Chris Sinclair is in Washington. Right? So I therefore went on to recommend that the government take action. Right? That the government take action, because no public response was issued to the concerns that was printed in the Nation newspaper with the article from myself, and I read the article to you. We did not receive any answers. So I therefore went on to say that a recommendation should be given to the head of the anti-corruption unit in Barbados to investigate why is it that the minister in the Ministry of Finance in Barbados could have possibly been falsifying a letter to the IDB to be able to borrow a $200 million loan in the name of COVID. And when we investigated the Jobs and Investment Committee, it was not meeting. Persons died, persons left Barbados, persons were not interested in working on it. Right? So we can see clearly that all of those loans, and we counted the $840 million through the different multilateral institutions that the government got. And you can see clearly that one of those loans was received under questionable circumstances. Right? So based off the accountability and the transparency of these loans, we find ourselves in trouble. Right? And this article that I just read was taken from the Nation newspaper, submitted by myself, Key Marshall, as a letter to the editor. And it says clearly, I don't know if you can see it, gave reason for 200 million. You can't see it because it's blurry. I'm going to try to get it on the computer that you can see. Gave reasons for $200 million loan. Right? That is what was said in the Nation newspaper. The last issue on accountability and transparency that I wanted to raise. Okay. Yeah, so good evening to you guys. Good evening to you guys. We're going very well this evening. We are about 459 persons. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you're loving this session. I'm enjoying chatting with you. Last week we had a very short show. So let me just do some pleasantries. Reverend Marius, good evening. Or Mari, Pedro Gemma. Thank you guys very much. Peter King, Sean Cool. I think I acknowledge Hurricane Writer, Diana Husbands. Saying good night to one and all in the chat. Good night to you too, Diana. Marcel was saying that was a skanky, Marcel. You on point right there with the VAT free day. Yes, the VAT free day was a distraction to hide the fact of what was going on with that loan that I just described to you. It was printed in the nation newspaper, so it is public information, and therefore we require an investigation in the minister in the Ministry of Finance, and the possibility that the Barbadian minister in the Ministry of Finance may have falsified a letter to the IDB claiming that he was borrowing $200 million in COVID loans on a recommendation from a Jobs and Investment Committee. And when we investigated the Jobs and Investment Committee, it was not meeting. Members died, members traveled for work, members were generally not interested. So that is an issue for the Public Accounts Committee, and it is also an issue for the Anti-Corruption Unit of Barbados. Right? The other issue that I wanted to raise as it relates to accountability and transparency was the issue of public contracts. Right? Because we're keeping on the loans here. Remember, we're keeping on the IMF loans and the transparency of the loans. Right? We're keeping on the transparency of the loans. And I wrote another article, and this article was carried in the Nation newspaper again. So there you have the Nation newspaper doing its yeoman duty in reporting the concerns that I would have raised as a person who has an interest in the economic area and the economic field. I raised some concerns about government failing as it relates to transparency. So I'm going to put it on the screen again so that you can see the proof that I was fighting these issues on transparency and accountability and ensuring that the government does the right thing and that the Ministry of Finance was indeed operating above board as it relates to these COVID loans. Now, I said here that in the name of transparency, accountability, and integrity, Minister Ryan Strong should account to the public by answering the question as to where is the public register of government contracts. Hey, where is the public register of all government contracts? Hey, as mandated by the International Monetary Fund, hey, the government agreed with the IMF, first things first, to establish the office of a contractor general. The government of Barbados agreed with the IMF to establish an office of a contractor general. Right? It has not happened as yet, but they agreed to it nevertheless. What the government also agreed to do is have all public contracts, right? All public contracts over $1 million, and this was agreed to under the first IMF BERT plan, the extended fund facility. Under the first extended fund facility 2018, the government agreed that all public contracts over $1 million should be placed at CAIPO, corporate affairs. You guys know CAIPO, corporate affairs. So they're saying, the IMF and the government of Barbados, that to achieve transparency, all public contracts should be at CAIPO. And this particular measure was rolled out in the IMF's Memorandum of Understanding of Economic and Financial Policies. And in December 2021, as one of the targets under the BERT plan, the government said all public contracts over $1 million are to be listed at Kaipo, which means that any member of the public could walk in off the street, go into Kaipo, and see a list of all government contracts. All. That is what the government agreed with the IMF. And this measure was supposed to be put in place since December 2021. Right? At the quote Transparency International, the quote Transparency International again, it says COVID-19 was not only a health crisis, but it was a corruption crisis. And it called for a full audit of the government of Barbados and its COVID-related expenses. So all of the money that was spent during COVID, all of the loans that were borrowed, because we were not earning any money. We were not earning any money. So the income that Barbados survived from during COVID was from loans, IDB loans, IMF loans. I just showed you all of the COVID loans. I showed you all of the COVID loans. I went through every institution and I showed you. So we added 840 million. That's what we saw, right? That has nothing to do with what we didn't see, right? So we have 840 million from what we saw, right? And the government was told, or the government told the IMF, or the IMF told them, whatever, put all the contracts at Kaipo, right? So all the money that was spent during COVID, any member of the public could be able to walk into Kaipo and see who has been issued a government contract. And it said that the issuing of government contracts to respective business players comes under the microscope. And luckily, the IMF, in its Article 4 consultation report of Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policies with Barbados, displayed vision when it asked Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ranstrong, to table what they call a Public Procurement Act of 2021 in order for crisis and COVID-related expenses to be tracked. And when I say expenses, I mean loans. Right? So there was a Public Procurement Act of 2021, which was put in place to be able to monitor all of the loans. So we had loans to build probably Harrison's Point. We had loans to upgrade the A&E. A lot of the money that was spent during COVID was from loans, and contracts were issued to be able to carry a lot of the work. And it went on to say that the minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ranstrong, explained that this new Public Procurement Act was necessary because it was mandated by the Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Plan, or BERT, austerity program, as BERT was amended in May 2021, and a new line item was added, which was supposed to list in the 2021-22 budget, which required all COVID-19 related government issued contracts in excess of $1 million be reported to the Barbados Parliament. All COVID-related expenses over $1 million were supposed to be reported to the Barbados Parliament. Now, at that time, we didn't have opposition in the House of Parliament, but I bet you that if we ask maybe probably the opposition leader, or we ask any of the members of Parliament, because we're not attempting to cast political device here tonight, but if we ask any of the members of Parliament if they ever saw any of the COVID-related expenses tabled in Parliament and debated during that period, guarantee you they will all say no. They will all say none of the parliamentarians ever saw any of the contracts or the related expenses that were. It is law. It was mandated by the law of this country that all COVID-related expenses were to be tabled in the Barbados Parliament. That did not occur. I went on to say again in the letter that according to the agreed IMF policies, both the contract and the names of successful bidders of government contracts, along with a public register of all government contractors, were made available in the Barbados Corporate Registry by the end of 2021. I personally went down to Kaipo and I put out a notice, a video, when I said that I went down to Kaipo And I saw Winston Clark there that same day, so Winston Clark could tell you about me being at Kaipo. And I personally asked, and the date I went to Kaipo was the 23rd of May 2023, last year. And not one worker in the Kaipo, the registry, had the slightest idea as to what I was talking about. Because I asked them specifically, can I see a list of all publicly issued government contracts? The workers at Kaipo did not know anything about what I was saying. They did not know anything about what I was saying. Right? So this is 2023 that I went to Kaipo, but the government agreed since that since 2021 that the policy was supposed to be in place. So that is 2 years and some plus after that, we still falling down as it relates to transparency and accountability, because the list of government issued contracts and the contractors, none of that information is there to date. Right? So the workers at Kaipo, they didn't know, so therefore I got no information. In February of 2023, while speaking in Parliament, economist Marsha Cattle called on the government to fulfill its promise. To publish the information on contracts awarded for public works projects. And she made the call as she insisted that the public procurement process must be fully transparent when it comes to the award of contracts for major government projects. Marsha Cattle, economist, said that the details of awarded contracts should be made available to the public. And in keeping with transparency, the government of Barbados made some serious promises that they have not kept. That is economist Marsha Cattle, who is a member of parliament for the government administration. And she's saying in February of 2023 that the government of Barbados made some serious promises that they have not kept as it relates to transparency within government. So according to economist Cattle, the publication of the information, whether in COVID or not, is critical to the trust and accountability of this government, and she sees no reason why they should not publish contracts over $1 million as they said they would, whether in an emergency situation or not. Why should we not publish contracts awarded over a certain size? So in the name of the emergency, significant sums of tax dollars were spent on government-issued contracts. And to quote Dr. Kevin Greenwich, government put in place measures where government had to report to Parliament all COVID-19 related expenses and procurements contracts in excess of $1 million to Parliament, that they had to give approval on these and that they had knowledge of what those procurements were. So there you have two contradictory statements. You have a statement from Dr. Kevin Greenwich saying that they put measures in place where the government had to put the contracts over $1 million to Parliament and that the parliamentarians had to give approval. And then on the other hand, you have economist Marsha Cattle, both of them are economists, economist Marsha Cattle saying on the other hand that the government did not meet the promises that they gave to the people, and therefore the information was not there. And sorry for focusing on the political figures, but politicians are the ones who speak on economic policy, so therefore I have to focus on what these persons said. So on one hand, Dr. Kevin Green is saying, yes, they did what they had to do. They put all of the information there, and Kaipo and the parliamentarians had to approve, and that is there. But then you have a parliamentarian, an economist, Marsha Cattle, when she was on the back bench, saying that the information is not there and the government has not kept the promise they made to the people as it relates to transparent government, and she sees no reason why the information cannot be published. I personally went to Kaipo and the information is not there, so therefore I have to side with economist Marsha Cattle and say that the government fell seriously short as it relates to creating a public register of all government issued contracts. and therefore we cannot see. Now, it would have been important if we had that public register in place because one, the whole project, we could have seen who was issued contracts for the whole project. Right? We've had the nation newspaper saying that the Chinese houses, and where the government of Barbados imported the Chinese houses, the Auditor General is saying that during an emergency period, and I just read a part of the story, it said in the name of emergency, significant sums of taxpayer dollars were spent on government issued contracts in the name of an emergency. So there was no check or balance during that period. And why I say that is because alternate views tonight is stating that Parliament, right, that Parliament had no real power during COVID. Parliament had no real power during COVID. So you have Parliament. Now here the word that I use Parliament, but I didn't say the Prime Minister. I said Parliament. Right? And why I use the word Parliament is because during the state of emergency, right, during the state of emergency, where the administration wrote out the Emergency Management Act of 2020, when this legislation was declared and the government extended the state of emergency for two years, they extended it for so long, had the people on the lockdown, right? They said in that Emergency Management Act that cabinet no vest any and all authority within itself to make whatever decisions necessary for the good governance of the country. If you all can remember how our parliamentary system works, we have the parliament, which is the elected members of parliament. Then we have the cabinet, which the cabinet is chosen from members of the parliament and the senate and whoever the prime minister appoints. And then you have newly formed the office of prime minister, right? So cabinet or parliament, which is most parliamentarians now are members of the cabinet. Remember that. Parliament vests all authority in cabinet to make whatever decisions necessary, financial or otherwise, without parliamentary approval. Right? Cabinet now has the power to make all of these decisions. So if we use back these Chinese soldiers had a kind of Barbados, cabinet can make the emergency decision and get Chinese soldiers to Barbados without parliamentary oversight, parliamentary approval. Right? That's what it is in the first instance. In the second instance, it says in that same emergency act that the office of prime minister has absolute power to make any and all decisions necessary in the name of emergency for the good governance of the country. So that deleted cabinet oversight. Right? So Parliament vests all authority in the office of cabinet to make whatever decisions necessary. And no cabinet vests all authority in the office of prime ministership to make whatever decisions necessary. So the office, not the individual, the office of prime minister had absolute and dictatorial powers in Barbados during the state of emergency. And evidence of that could be referenced in the fact that the Chinese houses, and if you read the Auditor General's special audit on the Chinese houses, he said that the government used the emergency powers to issue instructions to buy all of the Chinese houses. Right? So that's where you had cost overruns. According to the Auditor General, you had cost overruns of $20-something million, and the houses are not there. That is how you end up with situations like that. Lack of accountability, lack of transparency, lack of check and balance. So those legislation remove the vigilant eyes that we had through Parliament, during cabinet, and therefore no reporting was done on COVID-related expenses. And don't forget how we started. We started by speaking about IMF loans. Then we went on to the IDB loans and the other loans, and we saw that at least $840 million, based off our calculations, came in COVID-related loans. And as I explained to you, the minister in the Ministry of Finance in Barbados was borrowing one of these COVID-related loans from the IDB under extremely questionable circumstances. Right? So if the procurement process was followed, when the government borrowed the loans and then the government proceeded to issue out the loans to people under the guise of investment and driven economic activity, Parliament would have had a say in what happened with the Chinese houses. Parliament would have had a say in what happened with the whole project. Right? So I'm hoping you understand what I'm saying, and I'm hoping you're following the themes that the Auditor General set. And I explained to you why in his report he spoke about emergency powers, because the Emergency Management Act of 2020 vests some serious powers in the office of Prime Minister to completely sidestep cabinet, sidestep parliament, and to take whatever decisions necessary, financial or otherwise, for the good governance of the country without any oversight, without any approval. And I explained to you how the government fell short as it relates to having the contracts at KIPO as agreed with the IMF. I also explained to you that part of the IMF program, the government was supposed to establish the office of a contractor general, where contracts like the scandal for the jobs, where the former health minister would have resigned because his permanent secretary stepped ahead of him and issued an order to procure the jobs. And we ended up with an entire public debacle and scam where taxpayers' money was under serious scrutiny and question. So all of that would have never happened if the state of emergency legislation, which is the Emergency Management Act, was never in place, which gave the Office of Prime Minister these absolute and dictatorial powers to issue emergency directives to spend government's money willy-nilly. And if the government had followed the dictates that they agreed to with the IMF, we could have had greater accountability and transparency. Let's not forget, this comes right back down to the aspect of IMF loans, IDB loans, right? So I started with the IMF because most persons are concerned about the IMF program. But as you can see, the government owes the IMF 759 million. Right? But then they owe the IDB significantly more sums than that. Then they owe the Investment Bank for Reconstruction 441 million. Then they owe the Latin American Bank some other amount of millions. Okay. So hoping that you're seeing. So I am going to end off on that specific point. I'm going to start back and show you some documentation from the IMF. But in the meantime, I want to take in some questions from you, answer a question or two quickly. And then approximately about 9 o'clock, I'm going to pull up some additional documentation on the screen so that you guys could be able to read where we go from here. So I'm hoping that you're satisfied. I'm hoping that you're satisfied with my presentation so far. I'm hoping that the presentation gave you some clarity as it relates to Barbados, as it relates to the loans, as it relates to the amount of debt that we are in, and the possibilities for the future. Yes. So I've taken a quick question here while I search for what I want to put up next. Yes, unfortunately, we have to borrow more money. That's unfortunately, the situation that we are in right now. And realistically, the challenge that we are facing is really a structural challenge, right? It's really a structural challenge. So, regardless of which government is in power or which government will take over the country, there's still some serious structural challenges that we uh, have to face. So basically, the problem in Barbados is that renewed growth in the Barbados economy depends on removing a dense barrier of complex and old and antiquated government processes, right? So basically, the government is not up to the time. It's not up to date, right? Poorly performing government departments, poorly performing state agencies, poorly performing statutory corporations, state-owned, and the president stand in the way of new projects and new innovations in the public and private sector. And the reason for the slow pace in implementing projects in Barbados may vary, but they always relate to some type of administrative failure in the public sector of Barbados. So simple things like gaining town and country planning permission, very slow. The impact of possible corruption where ministers may stall projects because they did not receive kickbacks, right? Instances where you have to go to 3 different states and the president to be able to get one form completed. So things like this slow down the government's thrust. So I'm saying here in alternative views that governments need to pursue new areas of developments which can provide employment and foreign exchange. Right? And I said that unless private sources of income are injected into the economy, right? Private sources, not IDB and IMF loans, not foreign direct investment, or even domestic savings, local savings that are in the credit unions, that are in the banks, that are in insurance, unless we can get massive amounts of that level of investment coming into Barbados and local spending, unless we can get that level of ramped up spending happening, a massive void will be left in Barbados because the government, in agreement with the IMF, has to start rolling back the amount of money it spends, which means that it has to cut down the borrowing appetite that it has right now. Right? It has to cut the borrowing appetite. So when the government cuts that borrowing appetite, a massive void or large chunk or large hole in the public finances of Barbados will occur. So to fill that hole, you have to get revenue. You have to earn revenue. And we're not talking revenue from borrowing. What we're doing now, we're talking revenue from earnings. And we earn revenue either by taxation, taxation, investment, or savings. Right? So to be able to achieve the savings, you have to do expenditure cuts, which means that you got to size down the size of government, which means that people will lose jobs. That means that, some state-owned enterprises will be closed down. And that is not where we're looking to go. That's not where we're looking to go, right? We're hoping for the reverse, but we're in the IMF program, so therefore the reverse is simply not possible. So I said here that further unemployment will be unavoidable due to the implementation of what the IMF called a fiscal rule. And the government telling the IMF, or the IMF telling the government of Barbados, that you can spend only X amount of, of money on education. You can only spend X amount of money on health. You can only spend X amount of money on energy. And you have to cut your budget here, and you have to cut your budget there. That is the experience of Barbados right now. So what is being sold to the public of Barbados is that the public finances are healthy, that the economy is buoyant, that the economy is booming. But the economy on paper, it doesn't even look like it's booming on paper, and it certainly doesn't look like it's booming in real life because borrowed money, the revenues coming in from borrowed money, is the simple reason that government's finances look so healthy, along with the high levels of taxation. And I went through all of the taxes last time: gas tax, sewage tax, income taxes, all the different taxes that the government, fuel tax. Right? I went through all of those last time, so no need to go through them again. If you want a reference, you can look back at last week's show, and we went through all of those taxes. Right? So I'm hoping that you guys are seemingly following me. I'm trying to get on the screen the next documentation that I want you to see so that I can give you the way forward for Barbados and basically what we are looking at as according to the IMF. Right, so there we have it. I am going to put on the screen what we're getting, but let me just read a comment before we go. It says here, Simply Patriot, that IMF should tell them to reduce the size of cabinet and their salaries as well. Well, the government actually had 3 pay raises since they came to office. Senior ministers' pay has been increased to the level of deputy prime minister. So essentially, we now have 5 deputy prime ministers being paid at the level of deputy prime minister, which is approximately $192,000 a year. If they do that, they will lose the next election. Well, my job here is just to speak the economic truth. Yes. So I have some information to show you because we're gonna wind up approximately 9:30 as usual. Try not to take you too far. Right. So documentation from the IMF, which is the IMF's review on the Barbadian economy, December 2023. And it says here that the Article 4 consultation and second review under the arrangement under the same, remember it's coming back again, the EFF, the Extended Fund Facility Arrangement, and the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Right, so there you have it. Hoping you guys are seeing the screen properly. Right. Hoping you guys are seeing the screen properly. I'm doing the screen chat to make sure that you are seeing what I am seeing. Yes. Right, so I'm going to try to zoom in on the screen. Just give me 1 second. Let me put it on the screen what I want you to see. Oh, yes. So there you have it. Barbados. So it says here, press release by a staff report by the executive director for Barbados. Right. So this was published at the end of December 2013. So it says here as an introduction, the executive board of the IMF concluded its Article 4 consultation with Barbados and completed the second review of the EFF and the Resilience and Sustainability Facility arrangements. The completion of these reviews allows the authorities to draw special drawing rates of $14 million under the EFF and special drawing rates of $42 million under the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Remember, I said that the money is accessed in drawdown, so you don't get all the monies one time. You get it in tranches and drawdowns. So I'm going to show you the future drawdowns of future debt with the IMF. Okay, so just scrolling down. Okay. So it says here the board's assessment, the IMF board's assessment. I'm going to zoom in for you. Okay. Okay. So the IMF's board assessment says here the executive directors agreed with the thrust of the staff appraisal. They commended the authorities, meaning the Barbadian government, strong program implementation of their homegrown economic reform strategy, okay, and an ambitious climate policy agenda under the EFF and the RSF arrangements. Remember, extended fund facility, resilience and sustainability fund. Directors welcome the economy's robust recovery amid a rebound in tourism and encourage the authorities to maintain the reform momentum to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth, increase climate resilience, and maintain debt sustainability. They noted that the continued capacity development assistance will be important to support the authorities' efforts, Barbados government, and directors at the IMF welcomed the authorities' progress in advancing fiscal consolidation, which I spoke to you about, reducing state-owned enterprises, increasing taxation, etc., and reducing the public debt to GDP ratio while maintaining adequate social and capital expenditures. You know what I mean? Welfare, you know, programs that the various ministries are rolled out, capital projects like the Mill and Pave program and all of the government other programs the government are rolling out for investment. They supported increasing public investment. I just spoke about it, public investment, so roads, hospitals, schools, whatever, including climate resilience, using revenues from corporate income tax reform. They underscore the importance of maintaining strong primary surpluses to continue reducing the public debt to GDP ratio. Primary surpluses is simply government revenue minus government expenditure. So the government has been making more revenue while reducing expenditures. So they've been making a surplus, right? So the primary surplus does not include interest and debt payments, right? So when you take out interest and debt payments, what the government earns minus what the government spends is the government's primary surplus. So the earnings the government is getting out of the primary surplus, the revenues, they have been using it to pay down some of the debts, right? Hence the reduction of the debt to GDP. They've been using it to pay down some of the debts because we had to pay at least $74 million to the IMF last year because the debt repayments have started. So they also work on the efforts to restart domestic capital markets. You guys know the central bank borrowed a lot of money. The same banking system, First Caribbean, Scotia, all of these institutions are still hurting from the debt restructuring. So the national insurance borrowed government paper. The central bank borrowed government paper. The financial system, i.e. the banks, credit unions, insurance, they borrow government paper. So that is where the government is rolling out efforts such as the BOSS program to be able to help raise government revenues. Hence, restarting the domestic capital markets because they cannot borrow at the rate that they are borrowing going forward. So that is why they're saying that they welcome the efforts to restart the domestic markets because we have to wean ourselves of borrowing at the level that we are borrowing at from the IMF and its partner institutions. That's why we're trying to get local investment restarted again. Hence BOSS, hence the central bank bond, hence the restructuring on the NAS. Follow? Yes. So it says here that directors commended the progress in strengthening revenue administration, modernizing tax exemption framework, enhancing public financial and investment management, fiscal. No, I get too technical with that here. Trying to keep it simple. Right? It says here now that the directors welcome the authorities' efforts to unlock Barbados' growth potential, including by enhancing the business environment, investing in skills and education, promoting digitization, and the latter, meaning digitization, could improve public sector efficiency, facilitate access to credit, enhance labor participation, and support human capital. Don't want to get into digitization because that's a whole nother conversation. So I will leave that there. So it says here now that in the context of Barbados' vulnerability to climate shocks, the directors commended the authorities' commitment to their ambitious climate agenda. So they welcome determined efforts and impressive progress in advancing various reforms, including incorporating climate considerations in the budget process, improving disaster risk management, and addressing regulatory gaps to facilitate investment in renewable energy. So that's why in the budget you heard the Prime Minister speaking about investment in battery storage, and they're gonna get renewable energy going. Because right here in the IMF program that they have been borrowing money to be able to facilitate these type of programs, but we're not getting the transparency and accountability that when we do borrow these monies, which are going at a very hefty rate, there's no way that we can account because the government fell short as to their responsibilities to the people and to the IMF, not just the people. Yes, so I'm coming down here to work. I'm going to take this off so I can get what I want on the screen. Right. Anderson Nurse, I'm going to get to walk to the deficit in a moment. Just let me scroll down to where I want to get. But in the meantime, I'm hoping the public are utilizing this session as whoa. All right, come in there. Yeah, I try to get some critical information on the screen. However, the thing is moving a bit slow. So I'm not getting it as I would like. Right. So basically I think I covered most of what I wanted, but I just want to show you. Right. I want to show you. I'm going to end off and round up on this point here. But I'm going to show you the outlook and the risk. Right? I'm going to show you the outlook and the risk that is associated with the government's IMF program, and to show you what are the challenges going forward for us and the IMF, according to the report, by the way. Right? This is according to the report. This is not Kimara speaking. This is the IMF speaking. So any person could come and challenge. Any person could come and say whatever. This is not Kimara. This is the IMF speaking. No, and it says here, right? It says here that outlook and risk. This is the IMF reporting on Barbados. The economy is expected to continue recovering and inflation to moderate. Real GDP is projected to expand about 4.5% and return to pre-pandemic levels in 2023, supported by a continued recovery in tourism and related activities. Inflation is projected to decline to 4.4% by the end of 2023, driven by lower import prices. Over the medium term, growth and inflation are projected to converge on their historical averages of about 2 to 4%. No, I don't want to get too technical on that area, but I know we could question that a lot. So it says there that the current account deficit is expected to narrow to about 8.1% in 2023, up from 10.7%. So that's approximately about 800 and some million, 1 some billion. So the current account basically is the area that deals with the foreign exchange of Barbados. And I'm going to focus on this on another show. The current account deficit is basically earnings. So earnings from tourism, foreign exchange aspect, earnings from tourism, earnings from international business. We don't sell oil, but earnings from oil, earnings from whatever. So all the foreign earnings goes into what you call a current account. So the current account in Barbados is in the red, right? Is in the red. Don't mind this figure because it says here, it said there, and then you can score your back up. That figure is not completely accurate. So this is where you have to pay total attention to the reporting in these institutions, because higher up, it said here to us that the current account deficit was 10% of GDP, which means that you pass $1 billion. Look at it right here. Look. Current account balance, 10.7% of GDP. So that's over $1 billion and some a financial hole in the red that Barbados foreign exchange is in. Right? So you see it right here, current account balance, 10.7% of GDP, which signifies that when you look at Barbados' foreign exchange, the reserves, the borrowing, no matter what you do, you still have a hole of $1 billion and something to fill. Right? So you see Barbados has a serious challenge. So we're going to come back down now to where we were at just now, which spoke about outlook and risk. Right there. So it says now that the current account deficit is expected to narrow to about 800 million. So that basically means that the government is expected to give up about 2 to 300, or expected to cut that deficit by about 2 to 300 million. So to achieve that, all you simply gotta do is borrow $2 or $300 million less, and you meet target. You know, fancy about it. Or you got increased earnings by 2 to 300 million dollars, which means improved tourism, which means some cuts, which means reducing the amount of oil that it may buy. That would mean putting some caps on foreign exchange, things like that. But the facts remain, you got a hole of more than $1 billion on your current account. So we're gonna get all that foreign exchange to pay. Notwithstanding interest payments now. Interest payments now are another problem. Right? Interest payments now have actually passed interest and debt payments. Right? And I can show you that, and I'm going to show you that, and then I'm going to end right there. Because this is my last paragraph right here. So I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to show you the interest payments, and then we're gonna shut down for the night. It says risks to the outlook are elevated. Risks to the outlook are elevated. Where Bajans, we know what elevated means, that the risks to the IMF program are high, right? Which means that it ain't safe. It means there's no guarantees. So it says the medium-term economic outlook is vulnerable to the potential global economic and financial shocks and natural disasters. An abrupt global slowdown or recession in key markets like the US, the UK, or Canada could slow tourism and weaken growth. And intensification of regional conflicts could increase global commodity prices and raise inflation. But if you look here, look at it right here. They're telling you that inflation is set to decrease and decline lower by lower prices. But in the next line, it says here, that an intensification of regional conflicts, meaning Guyana and Venezuela, if you all remember that conflict, could increase global commodity prices and raise inflation, reducing real income in both the main tourism source markets and Barbados. Right? A tightening in global financial conditions and a rise in global risk aversion, which means that people across the world are looking to spend a lot of money, spend a lot of money, will increase the cost of external financing, which means that we got to pay more, affecting the fiscal and external account, and the economy is vulnerable to climate change risk and natural disasters, which could have an adverse impact on economic activity and increase the fiscal deficit and increase public debt and pose financial stability risks. So there you have it, people, directly from the horse's mouth, directly from the International Monetary Fund. Right? So you heard it directly from the horse's mouth. Right? So so you see for yourselves, don't be caught up by the rhetoric, people. Don't be open-minded to the facts, be open-minded to the information. Right? Because what the authorities are saying, which is the government, as compared to what the IMF is reporting, are two completely different stories. Right? Interest. Right, there you have it. I said that I wanted to show you one last thing, and that one last thing will be interest payments. Right? Interest payments. So I showed you the deficit, which is the current account deficit. And the current account deficit, again, is what deals with the foreign exchange aspect. Now I want to show you the amount of money that we have to be paying back in interest. Right? The amount of money we have to be paying back in interest on the loans from the IMF and the IDB and these places. Right? I want to show you how much interest we have to be paying. Right. There it is, people. Look at the rate. Look at the rate here for yourselves. Debt service. $1.6 billion in debt service for 2024 to 2025. Hey, can you see it? Just let me know if you can see it. $1.6 billion in debt service. So how will Barbados cope? How will we earn the foreign exchange while still maintaining debt service, while still under IMF program? And the IMF acknowledged that we have to wean ourselves from the level of borrowing that we're at. Where are we earning this money from? Where are we earning this money from? So I hope you guys are seeing here debt service. I'm going to try to zoom it in a little closer. Try my best. Try my best. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to try to bring it up again because it's not zooming as close as we want. Trying to get the debt service aspect shown. Right. There it is. Debt service. Right. This thing is not zooming anymore. People don't know what is happening here. But it's not zooming in anymore. But this is what But this is what I wanted to show you, that debt service in Barbados is set to be $1.6 billion for 2024. So $1.6 billion. So the loans that we've borrowed, and as I said earlier in the presentation, $14.7 billion in debt, approximately $3.7 billion in debt owed to the multilateral system, right? And the interest that we have to pay $1.6 billion in interest straight out to 2035, but 2037 actually, because during COVID, the government actually extended. Right? The government actually extended, the period from 2035 to 2037. So we have an extra 2 years, and the government has to pay $1.6 billion in interest. Right? Look at this right here. You can see the dollar. You can see the dollar figure right here. Right? Debt service, $1.6 billion. Doesn't it right there? Right? Tell me if you can see it right here. Look. Debt service. $1.6 billion in debt service from the loans that we have been borrowing from the IMF, the IDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, and all the other multilateral institutions. This is what we have to pay, basically. So there you have it, people. I think that I have come to the end of my analysis for this evening. I had a very, very good show. Spoke for straight 7 o'clock until 9:30, and we had a very good chat so far. So we're gonna wind up now. And I want to hear some feedback from you. I want you guys to tell me what you think about this evening's discussion. Maybe I can answer a question or two. But we are now at the end of this evening's show. The floor is yours, my people. So thank you to the 500 and some people who turned on to Alternate Views this evening. You're encouraging me every week. The show is growing, it's getting larger. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for taking your Thursday evenings. Hey, thank you for taking your Thursday evenings to coming out. And I thank you guys very much. But I want to hear you guys. Any topics of discussion, just don't hesitate. Any questions on the presentation, just let me know. Let me answer them for you. Thank you. Yes. Yes, we have Marseille City show was on our popping. Thanks, Kimar. Yes. Sure, no problem. No problem, sir. Yes. So thank you guys for tuning in. Like I say, I hope the information was beneficial to you. You can always watch the show and reference it as you wish. But Alternate Views, yet another Thursday. So we'll be back again next week, of course. I will upload the show as soon as possible to let you know what we'll be discussing. So look out for that. So thank you guys again very much. I think that I will sign off now. We are at 9:30. I promise that I'm going to keep it sharp, and sweet. So I don't want to go over. I don't want to go over to. But thank you. If you asked the question, did not see your question, Adrian Bascom. Yeah, I did not see your question. Oh, how can we get rid of this debt? But unfortunately, it's not getting rid of the debt per se. You gotta look for means and ways to pay. You can't get rid of it. You gotta pay, unfortunately, or ask for debt forgiveness, like what many other countries across the world have been doing. Debt forgiveness is really and truly the only way out for Barbados. Um, yes, there's no other way out of it. Debt forgiveness, or we gotta pay. Yeah, but we're gonna do that next week. Right. So we out of time, so I'm gonna call it a night. So tune in next week for a breakdown of the debt. All right. Sorry. As I was saying, in wrapping up, I want to encourage you guys to tune in next week. Thank you very much for tuning in. Next week, I probably want to go into the difference in the debt. Break down the debt was local, was foreign, and have some more discussion surrounding the International Monetary Fund and Barbados, and how the going into the IMF program unlock financing from the IMF sister institutions like the IDB, the European, and I didn't even touch on the fact that the Chinese, the government of Barbados owes the Chinese more than $800 million, I believe, by now. $400 million for the Scotland district. The Sam Lawrence Castle was high level of funding as well, even had cost overruns. So the debt to the Chinese is also increasing, while the debt to the multilaterals are also increasing. So the figure that I showed you with the 1.6 in debt service, that figure has to be maintained, and it will increase if we continue to borrow at the level that, along with the fact that we have a foreign exchange or current account deficit that is in the billions. So Barbados has many different crises brewing within the crises. So next week, people, next week, we could have another show right now. I'll be ready. But next week, I want you to tune in. Don't forget to tune on to the Marcia Weeks program tomorrow. She'll be on at 7 p.m. I'll be on as well along with the others. So I will see you on the Mars Civics program tomorrow. I will upload very soon what the next show is going to be about. So look to that. And I just want to thank you all, thank you all, thank you all, thank you all yet again. This has been our largest show to date. We've actually gone past 500 people. And all I will say is alternate views, your roadmap to a better future for Barbadians. People, goodbye. I enjoyed being here. My time is up. So, au revoir. Tschüss. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye. You say my foreign languages are going well? But I'm all people. Good night.